And there weren't many examples for us to learn from because the whole plant-based accessory space is still so new, not just in India, but globally. There really isn't any big brand that you can look up to and, take inspiration from and so on and so forth. So in that way, beach became that inspiration for a lot of brands. Today, every single brand that has come in this space in India takes its inspiration from beach, right? Uh, but as an entrepreneur, I can say that firstly, I don't think it's about being an ecopreneur or any other entrepreneur. Entrepreneurship is hard. It's challenging. The fact that you've decided to move out of your comfort zone on a job and build something of your own, I think that's everybody who's considering that and has done that should pat themselves on their back because that's a huge first step to take. Uh, you learn along the way. One of my mentors told me once that it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And as long as you're running, you're really in the race, right? Um, I personally think that uh, everything I know today about the space, everything I've learned today about the space came to me because of the brand. I mean, today the fact that I consult with a lot of founders on setting up similar businesses, the fact that I consult with some very large brands on how to bring the sustainability story into their communications, all comes from what I learned from Beach, from how I built Beach Grounds Up. So I think I'm extremely grateful for the last 5 years. It doesn't matter whether um, it grew into something, whether you decided to move into something else. So I think I can tell you personally, I take a lot of inspiration from this quote that says, "You do what you can, and then when you know better, you do better." So I did what I thought was right 5 years ago of building in the sustainability space. Today, I know so much more. So I wanted to do more, and that's what caused me to also pivot. But entrepreneurship, if you're considering it, it's not easy, it's hard, it's testing, but no better journey. I can tell you that, really.
Well, absolutely. And I believe that as an entrepreneur, you have to multitask at all times. I mean, I'm seeing it in my family. You have to take care of your work, you have to take care of the family, and so many other things that you have to keep on doing. And also knowing that there's no fixed source of income because you just left that. So there's a constant struggle on that as well. And that's truly inspiring, Arunati, what you just said. And I believe that many here would resonate with that and take it as an advice, but on starting their career in this. Chetsi, I'll come to you now. Um, I want to ask you that it's a very critical question related to funding, that attracting investors for a business, it comes with a lot of challenges. And especially for a sustainable brand, it can be even more challenging because, as Arundhati rightly said, that it's a new space. It hasn't existed before. And most of our investors, and even I have seen that, they're a little old with the traditional conventional thinking. So they often look for profitability. They need money. They need scalability. And when you align that goal with sustainability, it feels like a very tough balance. Given your journey with Brown Living, how do you think that sustainable brands can effectively attract investors while staying true to their core values?
Um, I don't think that profitability and sustainability are different concepts. I strongly believe that uh, to be and continue to exist in this marathon of running a business, you must get the basics right. And just because it's an impact driven or a sustainable business doesn't mean that you are excused from reaching the basics of how a business runs. You are in the business of doing something because you have to make a profit. You have to sustain your life first as an entrepreneur or as a community or as a team. And if you don't continue to um, make that profit, and I don't mean like making 20x of how mainstream businesses do, but it has to at least cover your costs, and it has to keep sufficient margin for your at least, let's say, a 2-year period. So uh, it is important to keep profit in mind. And so what ends up happening in this space is that sustainable businesses, and I work with so many of them, they would say that, okay, my material costs so much, my labor costs so much, I'm also indulging in fair wage. I have to make sure that I pay myself well. And the reason why that this whole space of sustainability has not reached the masses is because we have that mindset that, oh, because we are sustainable, it's okay to not do this, or it's okay to not be great at customer support or great at delivery timelines, or, I think when you're as a founder making all of these uh, things, and when they become excuses for the business, I think that's when they start failing. Uh, it is not enough to be sustainable as a product. You have to be good at everything in business. You have to be great at customer service. You have to be great at your product quality. You have to be great at your packaging. You have to still be relevant. You have to do everything that a regular business does, but do it better. So when you start or when you decide that you want to get into this space, you first need to understand the overall costs, all the costs involved, and price your product in a way that it doesn't burn holes in your pocket. We started with this mindset from the very first day, and a lot of you can read about this concept called the triple bottom line, or like today people are calling it ESG, uh, whatever. Basically, it's people, planet, and profit. And the way this focus shifts is that traditionally all investors would only look at an EBITDA or a profit margin. But increasingly today, and especially for larger companies, this has already kicked in. There's a responsibility metric that has been applied to companies. Companies are expected to follow ESG, parameters, and all the documentation, all the reporting. So typically in a single bottom line business, you would see only a balance sheet which looks at profit and loss. But in a triple bottom line business, you would see profit and loss of people, profit and loss of the environment, and profit and loss in terms of monetary value, which is financial. So it's a very interesting framework that you can adopt. And I would also like to point out that today investors are looking for solutions that are sustainable, because they are in turn borrowing money from lending partners who in turn have set these metrics for the world. So it's not like investors don't understand impact. They want to invest in impactful businesses. They want to get and support social initiatives, but not at the cost of losing money. Once you understand this mindset and build your business around that, is when I think this space will truly succeed. Uh, a lot of brands today operate as a private limited entity. And that's great, because then you are not just saying that you are a social enterprise, but you're a for-profit social enterprise, which makes sure that you are doing enough to feed yourself first. It's like sitting in an airline, right? Pehle khud ka mask pehno and then, help others. Which I think must be implemented across all social enterprises, because if you do not continue to make profit for yourself, how will you exist? How will you continue to run this business? So, yeah, I think I'm not sure if this gives you a structured answer, but I really think it's about, again, mindset of what the business wants to achieve. The business first has to make profit, uh, and also consider the other two parameters of people and planet, and keep reporting mechanisms in place already. So make sure that, like, you file your taxes every month, you also measure your impact every month. You also, check on well-being of your employees and the people you work with, and have all of those metrics in place. Yes, it is a lot of work. but it can be done. There are frameworks in place. There are people doing it already. So it's not like this is the first time this is happening.
No, no, absolutely. I think there was some really great advice for everyone who's here on, because that's the general confusion we have on how to manage profits with sustainability, because that has always been seen as a contradiction rather than something that complements itself. So that's a very new perspective that you shared with all of us, and how we need to change our perspective as well and think about the business first. That's that. I'll move to Vijay. Um, Now, I want to ask you, taking cue from what Chetsi had mentioned on behavioral change, is that most of the people here, like I also mentioned, live in urban cities. They don't think about the waste they produce. You use it, you throw it away, and then you forget about it. And that at that point, it becomes very difficult to change people's mindset about segregating waste, about eliminating waste mindfully. Giving it to a scrap also, I think, needs a lot of behavioral change. So, I want to ask you how you encouraged people to see waste differently, especially e-waste, and how has that built into the vision of Kabar Hatao?
First of all, I want to continue the Chelsea points funding, and then I will come to the how we are can. So the journey is a very this journey is experience I experienced. So I want to explain in Hindi because the in this especially in this sector, in the waste management and local waste picker, this they are usually discussion in Hindi and the local language, layman language. They don't understand the carbon credit yet. Many words comes in my mind. So I will explain those language so audience can better understand. So first of all, कस्टमर्स के लिए एनवायरनमेंट हार्म हो रहा है ये प्रॉब्लम नहीं है, वो कस्टमर की प्रॉब्लम नहीं है। जैसे कि आप एक वेस्ट पिकर है जो घर पे अर्बन सिटी में बैठा, उसके लिए वो प्रॉब्लम है ही नहीं कि लैंड फिल हो रहा है, चाइल्ड लेबल हो रहा है, ये सब उसकी प्रॉब्लम नहीं है। उसकी प्रॉब्लम है कि मुझे क्या मैं वेस्ट दूंगा तो उसका क्या पैसा मिलेगा मुझे। अगर ये चीज का आंसर यस आता है तो आप उस चीज को स्केल कर सकते हो। उसके अंदर हमने क्या है कि हम कोई भी वेस्ट फ्री में नहीं लेंगे, हम उसका पे करेंगे एज पर मार्केट कॉम्पिटिशन। आपके पास स्क्रैप है, आप क्योंकि आपका इजिएस्ट वेट क्या है, अगर आपके पास ये प्लास्टिक है, आप क्यों कलेक्ट करके आप किसी को दोगे। ये कस्टमर की प्रॉब्लम नहीं है, उसका सबसे इजिएस्ट तरीका क्या है, इसको बाहर फेंक देंगे, उसका काम खत्म। वो कलेक्ट नहीं करेगा। अगर मैं बोलूं इसको कलेक्ट करो आप, और आई विल पिक फ्रॉम योर होम एंड गिव यू द मनी एज पर द मार्केट एंड लोकल कबाड़ी। So for this project, I am picking the local Kawadiwala waste people. So they can solve the collection part. इस रिसाइकलिंग करना इज नॉट द प्रॉब्लम, प्रॉब्लम इज द कलेक्शन। रिसाइकलर्स के पास पैसा है, इंडस्ट्री के पास पैसा है, बट उनका कलेक्शन पार्ट सॉल्व नहीं हो रहा क्योंकि बोतल को कस्टमर के यहाँ से लेके वहां जाने की कॉस्ट बहुत ज्यादा है। और वो सॉल्व होएगा लोकल कबाड़ी वाले को इन्वॉल्व करके। तो हमने उसके अंदर हमारे जो बिजनेस मॉडल में हम उसको फोको फोको का नाम देते हैं, और फ्रेंचाइजी बेस्ड मॉडल, सब्सक्रिप्शन बेस्ड मॉडल। फॉर एग्जांपल, यू आर अ लोकल कबाड़ी वाला, इफ यू वांट, यू डोंट हैव एनी आइडेंटिटी, अगर आप हमारे साथ आते हो तो हम आपको आइडेंटिटी देंगे कि कस्टमर ट्रस्ट करे कि मैं किसी लोकल कबाड़ी वाले को बुला रहा हूँ पिकअप के लिए, तो उसका रिस्पॉन्सिबल लेने वाला एक बंदा बैठा हुआ है, लाइक अ टैक्सी। टैक्सी तो पहले भी बुक होती थी, लेकिन उसको ऑर्गेनाइज कर दिया। कलेक्शन तो अभी भी हो रहा है, बट क्या है कि जो एंड यूजर है उसको प्राइस नहीं मिल रहा, तो उसका इजीएस्ट वे लग रहा है इसको मैं बाहर फेंक दूंगा, हो जाएगा काम मेरा खत्म। और हम उसके अंदर ना प्रीपेड बिन का हमने पायलट बनाया, प्रीपेड बिन का सब्सक्रिप्शन मॉडल, फोको फोको मॉडल। इससे हम क्या लोकल कबाड़ी वाले के कंपटीशन नहीं बन रहे हैं, उसको इन्वॉल्व कर रहे हैं, उसको ब्रांड आइडेंटिटी दे रहे हैं, उसको सैलरी स्ट्रक्चर में लेके आ रहे हैं, उसको कॉर्पोरेट स्ट्रक्चर में लेके आ रहे हैं, उसके लिए आई कार्ड का प्रोविजन है, उसकी ड्रेसअप को हम चेंज कर रहे हैं। इस तरीके से हम इस वाली प्रॉब्लम को सॉल्व कर रहे हैं। मैम ने जैसे कहा कि फंडिंग तो, हम फंडिंग लेना काफी टास्क है। सो अभी हमारा फर्स्ट फंड रिलीज हुआ है लास्ट 14 जनवरी को, ये अभी रिसेंटली रिलीज हुआ है। हमारा ड्यू डिलिजेंस चल रहा था, और 2 ड्यू डिलिजेंस और चल रहे हैं हमारे एसटीपीआई से। हमने टाई ग्लोबल समिट में भी पार्टिसिपेट किया था, जिसको स्पॉन्सर किया था एसटीपीआई, सॉफ्टवेयर टेक्नोलॉजी पार्क ऑफ इंडिया, जो गवर्नमेंट मिनिस्ट्री के अंदर आता है। अभी रिसेंटली 16 तारीख को कानपुर के अंदर इवेंट था, जो एंटरप्रेन्योर सेलिब्रेशन डे था। तो उसमें 10,000 एप्लीकेशन में से 350 लोग सेलेक्ट हुए, तो उसमें हमारा भी सिलेक्शन हुआ था, 2% इन फ्रंट ऑफ 90+ इन्वेस्टर्स। तो अब हमारा जो बिजनेस मॉडल है, हम हर पैरामीटर को ध्यान में रखते हुए बनाओगे। और यस, जैसे कि कहा कि फंडिंग लेना आसान नहीं है, आपको प्रॉफिटेबिलिटी के साथ काम करना है, पैसा बर्न नहीं करना। प्रॉफिटेबिलिटी तो आपको चाहिए चाहिए, अगर वो नहीं रहेगा तो आप आगे लॉन्ग टर्म तक नहीं चल सकते, जैसा कि चेस्सी मैम बता रही थी। तो वो जरूरी है प्रॉफिटेबिलिटी के साथ साथ, लेकिन प्रॉफिटेबिलिटी के साथ साथ जो आगे के इस के अंदर जो एग्जिस्टिंग प्लेयर है, उनका कंपटीशन नहीं बनो। अगर आप कंपटीशन बनोगे, तो जैसे अब मैं लोकल कबाड़ी वाले को हटा के मैं डायरेक्ट पिक करूंगा, तो वो तो फिर वो तो जॉबलेस हो जाएंगे। हमें एक ऐसा मॉडल बनाना है कि वो भी जॉबलेस ना हो, कस्टमर को भी सर्विस मिले, और रिसाइकलर्स को भी सर्विस मिले। इन सब के बीच में हम जो सॉल्यूशन लेके आ रहे हैं, इन सब के बीच का सॉल्यूशन लेके आ रहे हैं, कि हम सबको टेक केयर करके एक प्लेटफॉर्म बेस्ड बना रहे। तभी हम इसमें टेक में ज्यादा इसमें इन्वॉल्व हो रहे हैं, और टेक बनाने के लिए हमारी इंटरनल टीम है। क्योंकि फंडिंग के लिए क्या है कि वो टीम देखते हैं कि आप अकेले कैसे कर पाओगे। जो ऑडियंस है उनके लिए भी यूजफुल होगा कि टीम बहुत ही इंपॉर्टेंट है। जैसे हमारी जितनी भी आईटी टीम है इन हाउस है, जो भी हमने ग्रुप टेक्स्ट बनाया, ऐप बनाया है, कोडिंग लिखी है, सारी हमारी इन हाउस टीम ने किया है। तो हमें इसके लिए, और इसके लिए इसलिए जरूरी है, जैसे कि कहा कि प्रॉफिटेबिलिटी, अगर मैं बाहर से बनाऊंगा तो कॉस्ट कहाँ जाएगा, कस्टमर के पास। कस्टमर को प्राइस कम दूंगा तो फिर से वो थ्रो करना स्टार्ट कर देगा, लैंड के लिए बोले मेरे लिए तो ये इजी है, मैं क्यों सरवाइव करूं। तो कॉस्ट पार्ट तो रहेगा, प्लस सर्विस आपको देना है। कॉस्ट प्लस सर्विस, इन सब के बीच को अगर मैनेज करते हुए आप निकल गए, तो आप सस्टेनेबिलिटी में बिजनेस बना सकते हैं। और बिजनेस बनाने से पहले आप एक, इसके अंदर मैं एडवाइस करूंगा कि कोई भी एक प्रॉब्लम को पिक करे, और प्रॉब्लम आइडेंटिफिकेशन करने में ज्यादा टाइम लगा है, और फिर उसके अंदर देखे कि मैं बिजनेस कैसे बना सकता हूँ, कस्टमर माइंड ऑफ व्यू से, इन्वेस्टर माइंड ऑफ व्यू से, इन्वायरमेंट माइंड ऑफ व्यू से, और ये सारे मैथ्स कैलकुलेट करके फिर उस प्रॉब्लम को पिक करके फिर सॉल्व। तो ये वर्क करेगा। अगर आपने बोला कि प्रॉब्लम है, जैसे मैंने स्टार्टिंग में किया कि कस्टमर की प्रॉब्लम नहीं है एनवायरमेंट, इन्वेस्टर को पिच करेंगे कि अच्छा एनवायरमेंट में ये हो रहा है, लैंड फिर बन रहा है, ये बन रहा है, ठीक है, इससे कस्टमर को क्या फायदा। उसको कस्टमर का कोई नहीं लेना है, कस्टमर की प्रॉब्लम है उसके घर पे कोई नहीं आ रहा, उसका प्राइस नहीं दे रहा, कंप्लेंट करने वाला कोई बंदा नहीं है कि ठीक है मेरे पास आया कबाड़ी वाला मेरे से गाली क्लोज कर दिया, मैं किसको कंप्लेंट करूँ। स्क्रैप सेगमेंट में ऐसा नहीं है। तो वी वांट टू मेक अ ब्रांड, लाइक आप सर्च करने के लिए गूगल पे जाते हैं, कबाड़ बेचने के लिए कबाड़ा टॉप पे जाए, सिर्फ आइडेंटिटी हम बनाना चाहते हैं, नॉट अस ये, और प्रॉफिटेबिलिटी के साथ। तो हम कस्टमर सर्विस पे फोकस करते हैं कि कस्टमर एक्सपीरियंस बेटर हो। प्रॉफिट करना होगा, हम ऐड लगा के प्रॉफिट कर लेंगे, लेकिन नहीं, हम कस्टमर सर्विस के साथ साथ स्केल करना चाहते हैं, ताकि कस्टमर का फीडबैक अच्छा है। थैंक यू। टाइम थोड़ा कम है, वर्ड्स ज्यादा है।
Well, that's always the case, Vijay. But I think what you're doing solves a lot of problems because in the starting chats you mentioned this is an unorganized space. And with your venture, it tries to make things more organized. And when you have a business, I think you have to deal with a lot, many kinds of people, especially the free rider mentality that I don't want to do something, someone else will do it on my part. And I think businesses have to take,
मैं
unfortunately,
जो एक्सपीरियंस किया है कि कबाड़ी वालों के पास आप अच्छे कपड़े पहन के जाओगे ना, वो आपसे बात
that's
प्रॉब्लम नहीं
true.
बताएंगे।
That's true.
मैं बिल्कुल दूसरे कपड़े पहन के जाता हूँ उनके जैसा, उनके पास जाना होता है। ये वेरी ऑनेस्ट है। आप गंदी स्कूटी लेके जाओ, ऐसे मत लेके जाओ, वो आपको बताएंगे नहीं कि क्या मैथ्स है इसके अंदर, इसके अंदर से क्या निकलता है, कहाँ बिकता है, नहीं बताएंगे। आप जब तक उनके जैसे नहीं बने, वो बोलेगा हाँ यार ये हमारा ही बंदा है, वो बात करेगा सही से, बोलेगा ये यहाँ बिकता है, इसमें ऐसे होता है। फिर पूछोगे तुम्हें कैसे, पैसे कैसे कमाते हो, तुम कैसे करते हो, तो उसके अकॉर्डिंग हम एक्सपीरियंस लेके ऐप में बैकएंड में चेंजिंग कर रहे हैं, तो उसको ट्रैक कर सके। क्योंकि जब सही से प्रॉब्लम नहीं आइडेंटिफिकेशन होगा, आप सॉल्यूशन नहीं बना पाएंगे। अगर ऐसा होता तो, क्योंकि प्रोफेशनल की तो क्लासेस होती है, लेकिन लोकल कबाड़ी वाला तो अनप्रोफेशनल है, उसकी क्लास होती नहीं है, उसको अटेंड करने की कौन सी इंस्टीट्यूट होती कि भाई अनप्रोफेशनल लोगों से अटेंड करने के लिए ये वाली क्लास है, ये कोर्स है, नहीं है। और हम प्रॉब्लम उनकी सॉल्व करने वाले हैं, उनके जैसा बनना पड़ेगा, तब वो सही प्रॉब्लम पता लगेगा, तो आप उसके अकॉर्डिंग प्रोडक्ट बनाओगे या ऐप बनाओगे या उसके अकॉर्डिंग, तो आपका वो मार्केट में सही आएगा। तो हम पहले प्रॉब्लम देखते हैं, उनसे एक्सपीरियंस करते हैं कि अच्छा ठीक है, यहाँ पे चेक पॉइंट लगाना है, यहाँ चोरी हो सकता है, यहाँ डिले हो सकता है, यहाँ प्राइस में घपला हो सकता है, तो वो ऐप में चेंजिंग उसके अकॉर्डिंग कोडिंग किया जाए, तो आगे चल के वो सक्सेस होएगा।
दीदी,
Very good,
यहाँ से हटो ना।
Arundhati. I think yeah. I think that's a very good advice that you shared, Vijay, and you yourself just gave a little class on how to deal with different kinds of people, and nobody says about that, which is a very good cue to my next question. And with this, I will also wrap up our insightful discussion. I want to hear some sort of advice from each one of you. One key takeaway that you had from your entrepreneurial journey, something that you wish you had known when you started, something that you thought, I wish someone said that to me, and you want to share it with us. So, can Chetsi, you start?
Um, I think I was a little naive to think that building a marketplace would be a cakewalk. But even today, 5 years later, I'm learning about regulations and policies and like I think when you sit down to build a business plan, which I think in our case was much later after starting the business, I think if somebody would have sat me down to say that, look, do the math first, sit and pen down what are the costs that you will have, not just today, but 3 or 5 years from today. How big is this market? I think I spent a lot of time in learning what investors want to know or hear because we were obsessed about the story and the cause and the problem. Like Vijay keeps saying that, प्रॉब्लम जो है वो सही आइडेंटिफाई करो और फिर उसके बाद उसकी सॉल्व दैट आई थिंक फॉर मी आई वाज so involved in solving the problem that I discovered that I didn't do the actual math of how much of energy this will take from me, from my family, from my support system. Um, and because I was so driven by the cause, I put everything in it. All my energies, all like, went all in. But I didn't take care of my health, which was actually the first thing that actually got me into this whole thing. I started it because of my health, but now there came a point where I was so obsessed with solving this problem that I completely neglected taking care of my health in that process. I was working really long hours, um, trying to solve for, and I think um, everybody says that entrepreneurship is hard, but I think um, it is hard if you don't have the right support system. Thankfully for me, I'm still alive, healthy, and I have all the resources that I can possibly get. But none of that can happen if you don't have a support system. So make sure that you surround yourself with people who will always inspire you, always push you, and always, be there. They don't have to do the work that you need to do, but they just need to be that moral support and guiding light. So build your advisory board, even before it's required. Have people who, give you honest advice, not just to say, oh, you're building this, it's amazing, but giving you hard critical feedback, because that I think goes a really long way and make sure that you have diverse set of people. So don't just only look at, okay, if you're a coder or if you're a developer, only surround yourself with techies. Make sure you have a good mix of different kinds of people who bring different perspectives from different walks of life. So and get a deep understanding of your end user. I think that is gold. Once you understand that, the problem is half solved.
That makes absolute sense. You absolutely need people to believe in you first to get the confidence to get started. Yeah. Arundhati, would you like to share your advice?
Uh, I think I would say that firstly, this whole space of entrepreneurship and then sustainable entrepreneurship today sounds like a very sexy space. Lots of people are entering, there's money, there's the whole climate tech or anything to do with tech is attracting a lot of interest. So a lot of people want to get into this space. And I would firstly say that be sure as to why you're doing it. If you're doing it because you feel there is an opportunity in the space and you will build for 3 years, get one massive, multi $1,000 exit or $1 million exit, then you're in for a rude shock, perhaps. I'm not saying it cannot happen, but I'm saying the chances that it will not happen are higher. So, firstly, what about this space interests you? You're all in this cohort for because you are interested in this space. But what about the space interests you? What is that problem you want to solve for? And what is that problem that you're willing to invest time in over an extended period of time? Nothing is going to come out of it in, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months. You have to give it that insane time and energy that Chets was talking about for an extended period of time for anything to come out of it. And and if you're always chasing that end goal and not enjoying that journey, I can tell you one thing that I've learned from my journey is that if you're not getting up every day and really liking what you do, and there are going to be good days and bad days, but if you don't really like what you do, it gets extremely hard. And then you will come to a point where you will not want to go to work and you will not want to do it, and that will be the end of it. So unless you're not really enjoying the building part of it, if you're not really enjoying the journey, I think entrepreneurship gets very exhausting. So be clear about what is it that you're solving for. Why is that of interest to you? Why does that particular problem kind of appeal to you? And then start building for it. And of course, please take care of your health, your mental health, your physical health. I don't think businesses can prosper when founders are floundering, really. So that's absolute given also.
Oh, exactly. I think that's the whole point. That's how people think, it gets stressful because you have to manage a lot many things. I'll move to Vijay. One thing you shared was to know how to talk with different kinds of people. Any other advice that you would want to give?
According to my experience, uh, if you want to enter in the climate near or any like a entrepreneur journey, so first of all, you need to identify the right problem and the correct team. They can support you because when you go to the entrepreneur journey, there is a many lots of parameters. If you want to go to the raise investment, so you need to plan accordingly first. So if you entering the any space in the related to entrepreneur, so you need to select the right. My focus is the right problem and the right audience. Audience mean to say that who will going to the solve this problem. Like you need a CA, you need a IT team. uh, Either you can outsource, but if you involve those persons, so it will be easier because it is my experience because I don't have money to start a private limited company. So I have onboarded in the shareholding pattern to related persons, so they can take care of that part. For example, they need a video shoot or the poster making. So I have a shareholding pattern in the shareholding pattern that particular person because after a some time you will be going very busy if you solving the right person. So if there is a person who is particular specialist in this field, so you need to onboard, give the some share equity, or if you have money, then you can outsource from there. So this is the my advice. If you have money, you can take care, hold the share in your bucket, and then give them money. If you don't have money, so you need to onboard related that person. They can help you in the journey. So this is my learning and advice. So before starting any business, look at this point also.
Great. I think we've had a lot to learn from the three of you. I myself had to learn so much. And you also helped me, especially, to change the way I think about approaching a business with a sustainability perspective. I will now end our fireside chat and open the floor for the audience to ask you questions. I believe there are some questions in the chat box. Um, I'll read I'll go through them. Okay, we have one
Okay.
question here from Jenna, which is for Chetsi. She has asked, since you spoke about the three parameters of people, planet, and profit, how do they look like in order of their importance?
Very tough question. I think the reason why profit is first is because that allows you to exist as a business. So it's like food on the table. But I think people and planet can change in terms of importance depending on what sector or what is your business model. So typically, if you look at um, poverty as an SDG, then may in most cases people would be before environment. Um, but I don't think you can look at them in isolation. You have to because they are interconnected. Profit is one thing which sort of allows you to continue running and funding the business in the future. But I think people and planet actually go hand in hand. So uh, even in that case of poverty as an SDG, which is a focus point, uh, if you make a healthy environment for the people of that community, specifically in that area, then you're benefiting both people and planet. So I think that um, you you'll have to define what is important for you as a business. In an ideal world, all of them should have equal importance, in according to me, but that doesn't end up happening. So it would ideally be 33% each, and because they're all interlinked. So if there is enough value in terms of money for the community, and they have well-being, and the environment is not getting harmed in the process, or is probably flourishing in that process, then that's an ideal world. But we don't live in an ideal world. We are living in a very dire time. So we have to prioritize. We have to define how much is tolerance. I think another thing to talk about here is um, we have this framework internally where we look at things from a three lens perspective. One is that things that you tolerate, things that you appreciate, and things that you will not tolerate, right? So for us as a business, we do not tolerate any amount of plastic in any product or in any ingredient or material of the products that we sell. What we tolerate is sometimes there are, let's say it's a liquid container and just the lid has to be plastic because it has to, contain the liquid, or is required to maintain the quality of the product itself. That is what we tolerate. And what we appreciate is a complete zero waste, no packaging, no layers in the process. So, um, again, this can be applied to any process, any um, product, or any service. If you can define as a business what do you tolerate, appreciate, or do not tolerate at all, it helps you set boundaries on what would you do in what sort of cases. And so this is something to think about. Uh, if let's say fair wage is very vague as a word, but what is fair for you is different from what is fair for me or Vijay or Arundhati. So defining what that fair is, and that sets your tolerance level. I think that would help.
Ah, I hope, Jenna, that answers your question. And I
So,
think, Arundhati, you've raised
yeah,
your hand.
I just wanted to add to what Chetsi said. So, for example, if we look at the whole space of sustainable clothing and fabrics, et cetera, right? Let's remove the profits part of it because that we have agreed is right on top. But if I was to look at the planet and people, so let's say you are building it from the most sustainable fabric, upcycle fabric, recycle fabric. You have all your metrics to show the planet is in place. But what happens to the people part of it, right? Are you paying people fairly? Are those artisans taken care of? Are they given the due credit, etc., etc.? I think these three metrics are also there in a way to be some kind of a filter. The idea is they can vary, but you can't neglect one at the cost of the other. So you can't be so planet forward that your people is in the dumps. And so maintaining that balance also depending on what your business is becomes very important. So every time you look at it, you have to look at it in completion to say that if one metric is affecting the other one negatively, that is also a problem.
No, no, that absolutely makes sense. I think that's the key, to have a balance of everything and not just let anything go unnoticed. I'll ask Heeta to take over the session right now.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Tulika. I think we have a couple of other questions coming in into the chat, but I think there's one which is sort of based on what the conversation was, and I'd actually like to bring something in before I pick up some of the questions in the chat as well. I think what I would like to learn from you is sometimes as an entrepreneur, we're very tied to our mission, to what we want to do. It's your baby, it's your idea, and you really want to build it, scale it, and you truly believe that it has the impact to make change, right? How do you, in that sense, sometimes deal when people not necessarily are aligning with what you're saying, where they, especially when you get feedback which might be a slightly critical, and it might come from a different source where it was not expected. Or if you're looking, for example, funding or investment, and that doesn't come through because they find, as per their ideas, it might not align with what you're sort of thinking. How do you then sort of deal with disappointment, or how do you deal with a setback or a failure in that sense? Because it is a personal sort of critique as well sometimes depending on how you look at it. So I'd open it to anyone in the panel who would like to pick this up first.
I can take the
Hanji.
question. So, according to me, I have pitched the many investors. So, I have experienced the what answer comes, and the human nature is if you pitch the any solution to the investor, they will ask you it will not scale, it will take time, it will take money, your team is not flying. Many investors, but take it as a positive and ask why they are saying there is a something missing according to his and her experience. So फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल तो एज ए ह्यूमन नेचर बुरा लगता है, मुझे भी लगता है, इन्वेस्टर आपको लगेगा। लेकिन जब भी बुरा लगे मैं जैसे करता हूँ, मैं अपने करता हूँ, क्योंकि हमने पहला रेंज किया है, हमने रेंज किया तो हमारी जो अलग टीम है उनको कॉन्फिडेंस आ गया, हाँ कि बिजनेस थोड़ा सा वाइबल है, मूवमेंट हमारे ओके है। मेन कॉन्फिडेंस इन्वेस्टर को तब आता है कोई भी आप फर्स्ट इन्वेस्टमेंट रेज करते हो, चाहे छोटा सा रेज करो, तो उसमें ड्यू डिलिजेंस प्रोसेस होता है कि शेयर होल्डिंग पैटर्न, शेयर होल्डिंग स्ट्रक्चर, इक्विटी क्या है, आपकी आईटीआर फिल हो रही है नहीं, ये हो रही है, बहुत सारे सीएस उसको ऑडिट करते हैं। तो वो होने के बाद आपको कॉन्फिडेंस आ जाएगा, यू विल गेट कॉन्फिडेंस कि यस माई बिजनेस फंडामेंटल इज ओके एज पर द डॉक्यूमेंट विच इज लुकिंग बाय द इन्वेस्टर्स। सो आप नेक्स्ट इन्वेस्टर के पास जाओगे तो आपका उनके माइंड में ये आ जाएगा, सेकंड स्टेप बढ़ जाएंगे कि हाँ इनका डॉक्यूमेंट ओके है, अब इसके आगे मुझे बात करनी। तो कभी भी इन्वेस्टर कोई भी क्वेश्चन करता है उसको लिखे, अगर उसको बुरा लगता है उसको 24 आवर के बाद डिसीजन ले, किसी भी तरीके का कोई भी डिसीजन हो। मेरे को भी कोई कस्टमर कुछ कह देता है, जैसे कॉल आते हैं पिकअप मैं जाता हूँ, तो कस्टमर जाते हैं वो बहुत सुनाता है, ये है फलाना ढिमकाना, ठीक है आप सुन लो, उसको 24 आवर्स के लिए डिले कर दो, क्योंकि इंस्टेंट जो आंसर निकलता है ना वो हमेशा गलत होता है। आप इंस्टेंट आंसर दोगे, बट कस्टमर का पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू वो नहीं था कहने का। अगर मान लो कस्टमर, क्योंकि मैं रिटेल में काम किया है, अगर आपने कोई प्रोडक्ट खरीदा है, प्रोडक्ट में प्रॉब्लम आएगा, आप सीधा होगे गाली दोगे, इसका मतलब ये नहीं है कस्टमर मुझे गाली दे रहा है, वो सर्विस से खुश नहीं है। आपको गाली देगा, आप क्या करोगे, तुरंत रिप्लाई करोगे, उसको छोड़ दो। आप 24 आवर के बाद देखोगे क्या था सिचुएशन, देन यू विल टेक अ राइट डिसीजन। तो मेरा एडवाइस यही है कि जब भी ऐसी प्रॉब्लम आए 24 आवर्स के बाद डिसीजन ले, कि आप उसके ऊपर थिंक करने का टाइम हो। क्योंकि मैं भी टीम मैनेज करता हूँ, चलिए टेक में हम दूसरे एक्सपीरियंस करते हैं, उसमें टीम को ऐसे मैनेज करते, टीम ने गुस्से में किसी को डांट दिया, लड़ाई करके आ गए हमारे पास कि ठीक से लड़ लिया, तो वो लड़ा था किसी सर्टेन पॉइंट के कारण, उसका लड़ने का मकसद नहीं था। क्योंकि मैंने एक्सपीरियंस में मैंने देखा एंड में यही सॉल्यूशन आता है, वो बोलते हैं, मैं ऐसा मतलब नहीं था लेकिन ये समझ लिया। तो ऐसा इसलिए क्योंकि वो इंस्टेंट डिसीजन ले लिया, का वो मतलब नहीं था। तो मेरा फर्स्ट एडवाइस है, कोई भी इन्वेस्टर बोले कुछ भी बोले, क्योंकि प्रोडक्ट बिल्ड कर रहे हो आप अच्छे से जानते हो, और उसके एक्सपीरियंस के अकॉर्डिंग बता रहा है, तो आप ये देखो उसका क्या चीज का एक्सपीरियंस है, वो आपके डोमेन का इन्वेस्टर है या नहीं इस वजह से बोल रहा है, या वो टेक में सिर्फ पैसा लगाता है इस वजह से, या कोई B2B में लगाता है, आप B2C ब्रांड बना रहे हो उसको B2B समझ आता है तो उसके अकॉर्डिंग बताएगा। आप वो भी देखो कि अगर मैं अपने बिजनेस में फ्यूचर में B2B बिल्ड करूंगा तो ये वाली प्रॉब्लम आएगी, तो नोट डाउन करो, इसके अकॉर्डिंग आप पीछे की पाइपलाइन बिल्ड करो। क्योंकि B2B में हम है, B2B में हम पैन इंडिया सर्विस दे सकते हो, हमने फ्लिपकार्ट से भी पायलट किया है, रोमन से भी पायलट किया, इन्वॉइसेस काटे, बट हमारे पास उनकी ट्रांजेक्शन के लिए इतना पैसा नहीं है कि हम कर सके, उसके लिए हमें फंड चाहिए कि ट्रांजेक्शन को रेगुलर कर सके। तो B2B में क्या है कि हम क्यों नहीं जा रहे, रीजन जा रहे हैं प्रॉफिट के लिए बस। क्योंकि B2B में क्या है कि मैंने एक प्राइस आपको दिया, वाई बंदे ने वाई दिया, मेरा बिजनेस बंद, क्योंकि कस्टमर नहीं है ना यहाँ पे, बिजनेस टू बिजनेस है, वहाँ प्राइस सेंसिटिव है। तो आप कहीं से भी आंसर मिले इन्वेस्टर्स का, आप उसको पॉजिटिवली ले, भले ही बार में बुरा लगेगा, ठीक है आपने पीस दे के बाहर निकले, आप ऐसे घूमते रहोगे, यार क्या बोल दिया, क्या कैसे कर दिया, ये बोल दिया वो बोल दिया, आपको लगेगा, मुझे भी लगता है, आपका एक पॉइंट ऐसा आएगा, मुझे भी लगा था भाई को जॉब छोड़ दिया, ऐसा ही लगता है, मुझे भी लगा था। जब मैं जॉब छोड़ा था 1 साल कुछ नहीं हो रहा था, कहीं कुछ नहीं, किसी कोई कहीं से कॉल नहीं आ रहे, कहीं से कुछ नहीं हो रहा, कुछ भी नहीं हो रहा, आपको लगे इससे अच्छा तो जॉब ही कर लेता मैं। आपको जब ये मूवमेंट पार कर दोगे ना, क्योंकि कई इन्वेस्टर ने हमारे को इसलिए ट्रैक करे कि वो देखना चाहते हैं कि कितने टाइम तक ये सस्टेन रहता है मार्केट, इसके बाद तुम्हें कॉल करें। जैसे हमने फर्स्ट किया तो मुंबई के मेरे पास एक दो इन्वेस्टर के मैसेज आए, तो क्योंकि वो आपको वॉच कर रहे हैं लिंक्डइन पे, फेसबुक पे, इस पे, कि एक्चुअल में ठीक है देना चाहते हैं, देखते कि कितने टाइम तक ये सस्टेन करता, मार्केट में सस्टेन रहोगे तो उनको कॉन्फिडेंस आ जाएगा कि हाँ ये बंदा करना चाहता है कुछ, देन वो आपको बाद में कांटेक्ट करेगा। आपको इन्वेस्टर से वो नहीं करना, झगड़ा नहीं करना कि नहीं मैं तो ये बना रहा हूँ आप ये समझ रहे हो, नहीं, फीडबैक ले, कॉन्टेक्ट नंबर ले, कनेक्शन में रहे, क्योंकि जब आप उस स्टेज पे जाओगे आप हो सकता है वही आपको कॉन्टेक्ट करें।
थैंक यू सो मच। आई थिंक दोज आर सम वेरी वेरी वैलिड पॉइंट्स जो आपने कहा कि एकदम तुरंत रिस्पॉन्ड ना करे। अ लॉट ऑफ द टाइम्स हम या तो गुस्से में या तो सैडनेस में या तो इमोशनल होके हम कुछ भी बोल सकते हैं। सो इट्स अ रियली नाइस वे ऑफ कि कूल डाउन, लेट योर इमोशंस नॉट ओवरटेक यू and then respond logically rather than just reacting to an issue. And then of course everything else that you mentioned as well. So thank you for sort of bringing those points. I'll come back to the questions in the chat. We have a question from Adesha, and she says, the question is again for Chetsi. She says, I'm a student working on an upcycling project and I get burnt out quite often. My health isn't that good. So I do feel the rush, the FOMO, and the need to solve issues, as you've said, but it is often very ambiguous. Any advice if you had to give on how to progress or how do you get over this? But I think this can also be answered by the rest of the panel if you want to jump in after Chetsi.
Very interesting question, Adyasha, and thank you for sharing such a personal story. I think it is very important to build systems and processes so that you are able to continue to create impact at scale on a regular basis. So I think if you are in an upcycling business, try to define the process, and that process is not to um, create barriers to getting the work done, but really to simplify the steps, which means that if let's say you are unwell for a day, or somebody else can simplify that process and do it, it's possible. The Japanese culture has something called the SOP, standard operating procedure, and what they do is that in Japanese corporates you will see a marketing manager 3 years later is become a head of HR, then he's moved to admin, then he's moved to manufacturing. And this rotation is possible because they literally put down every step possible in a task or a job to be done. And what that helps you do is it helps you delegate anything, and everybody can do all kinds of jobs. So I think what happens is that when we start an entrepreneurship journey, we want to have control. That's of course the first reason why we want to do things our way. But once you have cracked the way you want to do something or your approach to solving a particular problem, simplify it in a list of tasks that can be delegated. And I think one of the main things to learn when you become an entrepreneur is learning to delegate things and trusting people that they will do the job well. Because that I think is one of the biggest causes of anxiety in founders, that we don't trust people enough to do to do their jobs. हम सोचते रहते हैं कि यार इसको आता नहीं है, इसको समझ नहीं आता है, because of course everybody comes with their perspective of learning, their life story and their own limitations. Like when I started out, I didn't know anything about finance. But today, after talking to 180 different investors, my pitch is just 30 seconds because I know what they want to hear and I know my numbers on the other side. Similarly, when I'm talking to my tech team, I don't know how to write code, but I can exactly define what are the steps in my process today. And then that gives them an understanding of how do they build for this process. So I think it is a very mechanical way of solving for a very emotional problem. But it works. It is something that will simplify, even if it is that you don't have a larger team, but you have to do those things. When you break a big piece of task down into small everyday wins, I think that will keep your motivation high. It will keep your, uh, you know, it'll keep you inspired and keep you going. So don't feel like you have to solve everything today. Nothing was built in a day. Rome was not built in a day. All of us here have been working in our spaces. Arundhati has incredible amount of experience in HR, but when she started her own company, I'm sure she faced challenges in hiring people, right? So it doesn't mean that because you've done something for too long, it is not going to be a challenge. Everybody faces challenges, but the fact that you've decided to do something and you want to solve for it, just try and simplify your life, break it down into smaller goals, smaller tasks that you want to achieve in a day, and you'll be able to do it. And please make sure that you set realistic deadlines, because sometimes you feel like, अच्छा हाँ ये तो 5 minute का काम है, but to get into the zone of doing that 5 minute job, sometimes it takes you 3 days, right? So keep realist. Like I think planning skills is something that you should work on. Arundhati, I think you want to add something there.
No, I was thinking also I think the ability to zone out and zone in, right? Because we look at the big picture and it gets so intimidating and that you are not able to, so you see the big picture exactly like Chelsea said, break it down, saying today, this week, this month, I will only do this part of it. Because otherwise, if you keep looking at the big picture and say, I'm not there yet, I'm not there yet, I'm not over the hill yet, it gets very, very intimidating. But I also want to just add a little bit on the previous question, Hita, about feedback. One, I'm sorry, I'm putting on my HR hat because it was many years. But when we used to train people, we used to tell people that feedback is not positive or negative. Feedback is a very neutral point of view that someone is giving you. We are the ones who give it the label of positive and negative depending on how we are hearing it, right? The moment you take away those labels and say, it's a point of view someone has given me, take that time, that pause that Vijay spoke about, evaluate that point of view, see if it makes sense to you, or does it completely make sense to you, does it partially make sense to you, or does it not make any sense to you, and then decide how to go about it. And that applies for everything, not just investor. The investor thing gets a little more touchy because in our heads there's a power imbalance, we are going, we feel the investor is there, we want something. So we kind of code it as positive or negative, but the investor is also just another person coming with a point of view from the limited experience and worldview that they have. I think if you start looking at interactions that way, they get they get much easier to manage. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I think some very valid points brought up here, right? There is a lot that you will get, whether it's terms of feedback, whether it is in terms of reviews, whether it is investment feedback. And I think it is important to see how we balance all of that on a personal level, but also then how you take it back to the rest of the team, how that's sort of incorporated and how you build from there. But also some of the points that Chelsea mentioned as well is or not, feeling like we need to achieve everything overnight and make progress, but that it will happen bit by bit and getting very realistic on what is doable with, and then sort of scale up and build from there. So yeah, on that bit, I think that's another question by Hagrivan. I don't know if you want to come in and read out your question, Hagrivan.
Sure, Hita. Hello, everyone. So this question is a very hypothetical question, my very first question. So since we have heard about labels on environment and social aspect, I have been always thinking on why not we have a rating index for emotional factors like empathy or happiness, etc. and so on. The reason being is that so when we try to understand on how what for or what is the minimum extent of empathy that has been involved in the scenarios, it automatically solves on other scenarios which creates a harmony in any environment. Let's say between a person to person or between a multiple person working in the same environment. So I felt like empathy is one of the factors that needs to be maintained or that needs to be indexed in some kind of an assessment or that to ensure that the harmony exists. And when that harmony exists, I feel like the social aspect gets strengthened automatically by itself. So what do you feel like bringing an index or rating score for such emotional factors, or do you find any space for that to happen is my first question. And my second question, this is specifically to Chaitsi. I just want to understand, Chaitsi, like from Brown Living, are you, what to say, focusing or trying to focus in the future on policy advocacy with respect to product or what to say, any kind of labels per se? And my third question, which is a very common question to all, is that need to understand about the business or a startup scenario in India on how we are nudging the government towards policy advocacy on creating the sustainable markets. The reason for bringing the scenario is that I could see a very stark difference in European and US when compared to our country. In European and US, people, I mean, the startups, private entities, corporates form a coalition, public-private coalition, create a case study or prototype, and then nudge with the government, and they bring it as a policy advocacy, and they take it into action and they implement. For example, there have been one such example is the vinyl of coalition, which has been what is say formed by association between business owners just to ensure that they move towards sustainable use of plastic and other things and so on. Comparing to India, I see a opposite approach wherein I'm unable to. I mean, I'm not saying that the approach is not present, but I haven't been able to come across any business coalition or startup coalition so far on nudging governments in policy advocacy on creating sustainable market scenarios. So that's what I was trying to understand on if we had come across anything so far, or what do you think on having such coalition and having some conversation so that policy advocacy can be created from the business space, because only when the space for demand is created, other things would be set up and things would go motion, or else it would be super challenging to go against the as usual business scenario. So that's where I was trying to understand from all of you. Thank you, by the way.
Arundhati, do you want to take the question on empathy?
Oh, I am thinking about it. I honestly, what you've asked is a very how should I say it? Firstly, I feel like it's very hard to be an entrepreneur in this space till you don't have some level of empathy. Because and I see it across the board with founders I speak with. Can it be made into a kind of a framework? Is that your question? Uh,
Kind of, Arundhati, either a framework or an index or rating for products to understand that this product, when it was involved, it was ensured that the minimum level of empathy was ensured among all the stakeholders, right from the supply chain to any person involved in the product mix.
oh,
At times that the issue on social aspect rises from the supply chain, wherein we would never get an idea on what are the social condition or how are the social aspect being present over there, except for audits and
but
certificates.
I think that we are still a little while away from this, to be honest. I feel like even today, most businesses, most labels, and in India, while the advertising, while ASCI is coming up with more and more guidelines on how you need to, put labels and all that, we are still a real while away from measuring something as intangible as empathy. We are still not even declaring ingredients properly. We are still not talking about, uh, you know, we can still get away by. I can tell you in my space, you can still get away with things like very vague terms like eco-friendly, vegan, planet-friendly, carbon neutral, which technically means nothing, right? So I think we are still at that space where we are saying that when we make a few claims as a business and a brand, at the bare minimum, they need to be verifiable. They need to be verifiable by a third party before you can make those claims. Because today, the consumer courts allow you to go and ask those questions, saying, "Hey, you've said these things. Where are the claims?" Being able to have a product which is assessed on different levels of empathy, so that people can, take those informed choices, hypothetically good idea. I think we are very, very far away from that. We have many, many steps to make before we get there. We need to get to a place where firstly consumers start reading labels. Firstly, they start understanding what's in the label. They start asking questions about something which does not sound right. Then comes something like this. So we're a bit away, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yes, Chetsi, if you want to jump in.
Yeah, I agree with Arundhati, but something to think about and measure is I think we are not even able to measure health as a metric, because when you talk about people and social impact, the definition of health itself is so vague. I'm not sure how. It'll be very interesting to see how we are measuring empathy. Going to your next question on, I think your question was about policy influence. Can you just repeat that one part?
Just trying to understand on what is the current scenario wherein startups and business form coalition and move towards policy advocacy for any of the sustainable business or market principle to be implemented in
So I
space.
think policy advocacy is happening at multiple levels. But like if you see just the plastic ban itself, which happened many years ago, I think 2016 is when it started and 2018 was when it was re-implemented. Um, Creating a policy is beautiful. It shows that the government is paying attention to people's problems, but being able to solve for it at a grassroots level is what we lack today. Like Vijay said, right, that problem recyclers की नहीं है, problem collection की है. अगर वो प्लास्टिक कलेक्ट ही नहीं हो रहा है तो आप रिसाइकलिंग कैसे करोगे? And that's why the cost of recycling goes high in terms of removing single-use plastics. If there are not alternatives which are as good and as affordable as plastic, widely available in the entire nation, we cannot execute a plastic ban. And just by fining people on using plastic, आप कैसे control करोगे? How do you control a ठेला वाला who's selling vegetables to not give out a plastic bag? How there are no ways to execute this today, and like a lot of people are trying to solve for it. We as platforms and as small brands are doing our part in sort of in every communication we say, please bring your own bag, please don't do this. But consumer behavior cannot just happen with one thing in isolation. It has to happen at all levels. So if a policy is made, the government has to work with manufacturers, it has to work with ecosystem players, it has to work with material innovators, it has to work with, everybody in the value chain. It has to work with consumers. It has to have a system. Today, when you in a city like Bombay, when you're breaking traffic rules, you get fined because all the policemen are equipped with a mobile phone who have a system to capture and fine somebody. Before this, there was no system or there was no way to track how much of crime is happening or how much of traffic violation is happening. So this is a systemic shift that needs to happen at all levels, and which is why coalitions are a great solution. But those coalitions need to have enough power to influence this change. I think we were also talking about this whole investor founder paradigm shift and power play that happens. I think all of us are doing our bit in our limited capacities, but when we come together, we should all be given equal respect. I think that startups, you will go to any startup sort of convention, people look at startup founders like they're kids, like they don't know what they're doing, just because they don't have enough revenue in place, which is so sad because somebody has actually had the strength to solve for something, is investing time. On the same, on the other side, if you look at the investor world, they have been sitting and looking at thesis, and what this thesis means is their understanding of what the world, how the world works. But that thesis, without having groundwork done, is of no use. Today, everybody is saying AI is sexy. AI is nothing but a mathematical algorithm which is so complex that humans can't process it in real time. But it is nothing but that. It feeds on past data and it predicts a future which is based on that past data. So if my past data shows that people will choose mainstream non-sustainable products, because data only exists for that. There is no data that supports that people want to choose sustainable products. So there are lots of gaps, and I think uh, there is a lot of energy as well in this generation of Gen Zs and millennials to solve for it. So I think last point of giving advice would be that please try to solve for something that is a real world problem. Don't create another product that already exists. Don't create another replica of something that um, is already making lots of money. Try to find a gap and try to solve for it and do it well. I think if we all get into that mindset, things will fall in place. Like we've been approached by government bodies, we've been approached by corporates, all in, and I'm not boasting, but really um, it has been because we've been on that track. We've been focused on solving for this one thing, which is plastic free consumption. So when people will see you continue to consistently deliver in one space, and when you are solving, the deeper you go, the deeper you will understand, the more problems you will uncover, and you will find people to work with you as well. This space of sustainability is very collaborative. Uh, Absolutely like no other industry. Everybody wants to come together and solve. So just keep your head at it, and policy, government, taxation, investments, everything will flow in. You just have to be patient and just keep doing your work.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for that. I think it's some clear value that we can see when we sort of think of it in a different point of view as well. Vijayji, we'll come to you next. Ishan से एक question है. He said कि we've spoken about how you pitch to investors in general, but you're working with waste workers. How do you collaborate with them? और आपने थोड़ी सी you had mentioned also कि अगर आप उनके साथ जा रहे हो तो उनके जैसे कपड़े पहनो, look like them, be like them, speak like them. But how else will you get collaboration from the ground up when you're working with an entire different section?
तो फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल कोलेबरेशन का बात है तो एक्चुअली क्या है कि हमारे जो की प्लेयर है ना, वो वेस्ट पिकर ही है और लोकल कबाड़ी वाला है। बिकॉज उनसे कोलेबरेशन करना है तो उनका जो डेली अर्निंग प्रोसेस है वो आपको समझना पड़ेगा, कैसे पैसे कमाते हैं वो लोग। उसी के अकॉर्डिंग आपको उनको पैसे देने पड़ेंगे। फॉर एग्जाम्पल, अगर अभी आप देखेंगे व्हीकल सेक्टर में, ट्रांसपोर्टेशन में, जैसे ओला आया, फिर उसके बाद रैपिडो आया। क्या है कि पहले वो वीकली पेमेंट देते थे, फिर मंथली पे आए, फिर डेली पे आए। वैसे वेस्ट पिकर है, उनको सुबह काम पे शाम को पैसा चाहिए। वो उस तरीके से काम करते हैं, उनका नेचर ऐसा है। अगर आप बोलोगे ठीक है अब मैं 10,000 की जगह 15,000 दूंगा लेकिन महीने के एंड में दूंगा, वो नहीं आएंगे। वो उतने दिन तक सस्टेन ही नहीं करेंगे। वो उनकी प्रॉब्लम है, हमारी प्रॉब्लम नहीं है। उनके प्रॉब्लम के अकॉर्डिंग अपना सॉल्यूशन दे उनको, कि उनको अच्छा ठीक है तो उनको आप दे कि सुबह आप काम करो, शाम को पैसा मिल जाएगा। भले ही आप मिनिमम वेजेस को फॉलो करें, उसको डिवाइड कर दे 30 डेज में, आप डेली पेमेंट करें। उनकी प्रॉब्लम है डेली पैसा चाहिए, क्योंकि उनके पास उतना मनी नहीं है कि वो सस्टेन कर सके। और इसी वजह से वहां के उसकी जर्नी आप देखेंगे तो आपके सेक्टर में एक छोटा कबाड़ी वाला होगा जो रिक्शा लेके घूमते हैं, उसी सेक्टर के अंदर एक जहां पे वो जाके ड्रॉप करता है वो पैसा लेके बैठा हुआ है गल्ले पे, वो लेमन लैंग्वेज में वही कहते हैं। वो क्या करता है, उनको 500 1000 रुपये देता है, लो भाई तुम कलेक्ट करके आओ। कलेक्ट करके लाता है, उसको वो दे देता है, वो उसको उसी टाइम पैसा देता है, मतलब कि वो पैसे भी की फैसिलिटी दे रहा है, एक रिक्शा भी दे रहा है। इस तरीके को हमें कॉर्पोरेट में एडजस्ट करना पड़ेगा, क्योंकि बाकी चीजों की तो सप्लाई चेन बनी हुई है, लेकिन यहाँ रिवर्स है, 360 डिग्री चेंज है। कि फॉर एग्जाम्पल आपने नया प्रोडक्ट बिल्ड किया वेयर हाउस में, तो वहीं पे क्यूआर कोड चिपका दिया, सिस्टम में ट्रैक हो जाएगा कहाँ कहाँ जा रहा है। जब नीचे से आपको वेयर हाउस में लेके आना है, तो कस्टमर के पास कोई क्यूआर कोड नहीं है, कबाड़ी वाला जहां से कलेक्ट करेगा उसके पास कोई क्यूआर कोड नहीं है। आपको उसकी हेल्प से करना पड़ेगा, इमेज का एल्गोरिदम सेट करके इमेज की, ताकि कस्टमर जब पिकअप रिक्वेस्ट डाले इमेज क्लिक करे तो आपके पास आ जाए, जो आपका वेंडर जो पिक करे तो इमेज क्लिक करे, तो उनकी परसेंटेज ऑफ रेशो आ जाए कि हाँ कितने परसेंट सही पिकअप हुआ है। 100% नहीं आएगा, लेकिन ट्रैक उसी तरीके से होगा। तो ये जो जैसा कि क्वेश्चन थे कैसे कोलेबरेट करें, तो उन्हीं के प्रॉब्लम का सॉल्यूशन देख के उनसे कोलेबरेट करेंगे। अगर आप उनको बोलेंगे कि ठीक है आप उसके पास जाते हो, वो पैसा देता है, आपको ये सही फैसिलिटी नहीं देता, मेरे साथ काम करो मैं ये सही फैसिलिटी दूंगा। ईएसआई में कितना जाता है, 500 800, आई थिंक 800 रुपये जाता है, लेकिन इम्पैक्ट क्या है, उसकी सारी फैमिली कवर है, सारे उसके बच्चे कवर है सब। अगर आप लोकल कबाड़ी वाले में ये बिल्ड कर दे तो क्या होगा उससे, अगर 2 3 कबाड़ी वाले ने भी उसका बेनिफिट लिया, वो माउथ स्प्रेड होगा, वो बोलेगा इनके साथ जुड़ो, ये फैसिलिटी देते हैं, जो कि है कुछ नहीं, गवर्नमेंट दे रही है, आपको बस उसको प्रेजेंट करना है। तो इस तरीके से ना वो अनऑर्गेनाइज सेक्टर भी धीरे धीरे ऑर्गेनाइज होना स्टार्ट हो जाए, तभी वो कलेक्शन पार्ट है तभी सॉल्व हो जाए।
Thank you.
अगला क्वेश्चन क्या था?
Thank you. Um, I think नहीं ये क्वेश्चन यहीं पर था. There's another question Ishan say for Arundhati, and there's another question as well, Arundhati, for you. So maybe I'll club both of the questions and then you can answer them. Ishan has a question from VUC saying, as an ex-HR professional, what are the key parameters that you consider when hiring in this space? Since it's not just about being an environmentalist, so are there any qualities that you prioritize? And on the same, well, not on the same lines, but there's another question from Harini, which I'm just trying to go back in the chat. Give me 1 second. Yeah. So she says, can you please walk us through the process of manufacturing environmental friendly clothes? And I think probably she means the bags, the products that you made at Beach. And how do you source, and is there any recycling, and how is it done?
Oh, oops, what happened? Sorry, 1 second. Sorry. Yeah. I'll take the hiring question first. So, I think whether I was whether I was hiring at the jobs I did, or 1 second, guys, 1 second. Yeah. Whether I was hiring at the jobs I did, or for my own startup, I think my first thumb rule is attitude over aptitude always. None of us are doing, we are not building rocket launchers. We are not doing anything which is rocket science. Everything can be learned. Information today is more accessible than it ever was. So I would first look at someone who wants to work in this space, is interested to work in this space, and who wants to do a good job. Who is looking at growth, who is looking at taking on more responsibilities, as a founder, as Chetsi said, we are always looking to delegate. And we are looking to delegate to people who we can trust will get the job done. So whether you are a ecopreneur, or a founder building a D2C brand, or a tech brand, or I am the hiring head of a large organization, I think the parameters remain the same. Basic technical understanding, basic knowledge of the space is table stakes. You should have that, but I don't think that guarantees success at the job. It's always your attitude, your ability. How do you work as a team? How do you solve for problems? How do you take responsibility? How do you take accountability? How do you figure out something you don't already know? Can you be trusted? All of that. Are you ready to take one for the team? Are you ready for a startup? I would say, are you ready to work in just volatility? Today we are thinking something, tomorrow we might think something else. Are you comfortable with ambiguity? These are all things I would consider if I was hiring someone to work for me. Um, so that's the answer to the first question. The second one, so I used to work with plant-based alternatives to leather. These are all essentially very patented materials. Millions of dollars in research. Typically, one single manufacturer doing it who has worked for years and years on kind of, refining that research. Plant-based alternatives to leather are essentially leather lookalikes made by materials, which could be anything. It could be pineapple leaves, it could be banana fiber, it could be cactus pulp, it could be rubber. Anything which has over 60% of bio-based content can technically be called as a plant-based alternative. And then obviously the idea is you keep increasing that plant-based content, you keep reducing any content of plastic in it, and that's what makes it plant-based. When I used to, in 2019, we used to import a lot of it because there wasn't any kind of research happening in India. All of this research was happening outside the country. Now there are great startups in India working with plant-based alternatives. So you have leather alternatives made out of banana fiber, tomato pulp, mushroom waste. There is a lot of work happening at the IITs, a lot of research. So I do think that India is going to really kind of take over this space in some time. But yeah, these are the materials we used to work with. I used to spend a lot of time on technically understanding these materials, understanding why they could be good alternatives, testing them, because at the end of the day, the material can be anything, sustainability can be anything, but if the product doesn't last and if the product doesn't perform well, it is not sustainable. End of story, right? So, how do you take a product? How do you test it? How do you test it for longevity? How do you test it for wear and tear? How do you test it for performance and then make products out of it? That's what we used to do at Beach. Uh, can these materials be recycled? Technically, the answer is yes. They should be able to either be completely or partially recycled. Did we do it at Beach? The answer is no, because ideally, if we sold something at Beach, we would want it to, finish a lifetime of 4, 5 years, 6 years, maybe before we take the product back and recycle it. We weren't in the business that long. Ideally, I should have liked to do it, but can it be done? The answer is yes, it can be.
Thank you. We'll come back to Chetsi. I think there's another question. Sorry, I'm going back and forth in the chat. And now yeah. So again, there's another question from Ishan, which is, how do you handle one of the most challenging customer questions when it says this is very costly, or why should I buy this compared to something else in the market? The cost factor doesn't add up for me.
I think this is a common question that everybody asks for a sustainable brand. But the question itself is driven only from one parameter, which is price. That same customer would probably be wearing something which is more expensive, but doesn't understand what are the repercussions of that material. Or so I think it is easier to answer this question once you have context of who the question is coming from. But it all boils down to mindset. So if you are somebody who is looking to reduce your spending, when you choose sustainable products, it actually ends up becoming more cost effective. It is per unit cost versus long-term spending. It's a thing about mindset. There is no right or wrong answer for this, but if there is a product that is hand woven, made by hand, and we have to engage in fair wage, there is a cost. Today, things have become cheaper because those solutions have scaled to a level where they can be sold at that price, and that price also has a cost attached to it. Somebody somewhere is paying that price. So, to give you an example, the classic case of Zara, Shein, all these fast fashion companies that you hear about all the time, they are able to give you terrible quality, terrible material products at prices that have made it so easy for you to shop 20 times more than you used to 10 years ago. So, yes, if you look at per unit price, it is more expensive. But interesting thing that I've been noticing these days on packages and labels is that there is an MRP. Like I have this one bottle here with me of this kada that I drink, and it says MRP is 140 rupees and unit sale price is 0.7 rupees per ml. Now, there are things like if I do the same thing for a protein shake, the per ml price would probably be in 5 or 6 rupees. Something else which is richer in ingredients will be probably higher. It's about like you are looking at a golden looking thing, but it's actually made of brass, and so it's 600 rupees. But if you actually buy it in gold, it will cost you lakhs. So you cannot compare apples to oranges. That is, I think, one way to solve for it. Materials, ingredients cost. There is a cost for it. People behind it, there is a cost to it. And when you talk about sustainable and social impact values, people tend to price things slightly higher because they are making sure that those people are getting paid in the process. So I don't think sustainable products are costly anymore. 5 years ago, yes, this question was very more common than today. But because production has increased, supply of these things have increased, and the market is more organized, there is less gatekeeping of some of these products. So today you have access to a Kashmiri Pashmina on the internet, which is also genuine. You have access to a handmade, hand-woven khara kapas fabric, which is available at like 1,000 rupee shirt or a 2,000 rupee shirt. But at the same time, you go to a Peter England or a Color Plus, which also charges the same, right? But they are not giving you higher quality or more sustainable material. So you are not making an apple to apple comparison. Today, if you look at plastics and you compare bioplastics to it, plastic is so cheap today because it has been built as an industry for over 60, 70 years. When it was invented, it was not cheap. Today it is. Solar panels, again, 20 years ago, you could not imagine putting it in your homes, but today you can because there is policy, there's government subsidy, and there's higher production, which has taken the price down. So there is a term called economics of accessibility. The more something becomes accessible, the cheaper it gets. And sustainable products are becoming cheaper today. And that's happening across the board, across technologies, across materials, across segments. So why should I purchase from you is a question that can be solved with great customer support, with your differentiation in design, your differentiation in how you put things together, and that's a secret source of the business. So we as a platform don't create anything. We are not manufacturers. We curate products that are beautiful looking, high social impact, high environmental impact. And that is why people come to us, because we curate, we validate, we verify. And we know how this product is made, what will it do at the end of its life, and we ensure that it doesn't have a landfill end of life sort of journey. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chetsi. I think that was a really nice way to respond and sort of bring everything together. Vijay ji, आपके लिए एक और question है, and then I think we're nearing towards the end of this Q&A. But Vijay ji, there's one question for you. It says, what happens after electronic waste is collected? How is it segregated and recycled? Can you share a little bit more on the process?
Actually, If you are a, I don't know the audience, if you are a startup or the already in a business, there is a two point. अगर आप कोई स्टार्टअप है, आप रिसाइकलिंग करने का प्लांट नहीं लगा सकते क्योंकि उसके लिए बहुत पैसा चाहिए। आप एग्जिस्टिंग प्लेयर है, आप लगा सकते हो। तो दोनों का सोल्यूशन ये है कि अगर आप स्टार्टअप है तो पहले अपनी थोड़ी सी आइडेंटिटी बनाइए इनिशियल लेवल पे, ताकि आप किसी रिसाइकलर्स या ब्रांड जो रिसाइकलिंग करता है उससे आप एमओयू साइन कर सके। क्योंकि आप आज ब्रांड स्टार्ट किए और जाएंगे कि मेरे से एमओयू साइन कर लो, मैं आपको प्रोडक्ट दूंगा, और साइन नहीं करता क्योंकि आपकी विजिबिलिटी नहीं है अभी। तो अभी हमने नेशनल और इंटरनेशनल दोनों एमओयू साइन कर लिए। वो पाइपलाइन में तीन चार और वेंडर है, जो रिसाइकलर है, जो सेंट्रल पोल्यूशन कंट्रोल बोर्ड से ऑथराइज है। तो मीन्स इनिशियल लेवल पे हम रिसाइकलिंग नहीं करते, हम ऑथराइज रिसाइकलर से रिसाइकलिंग करवाते। फ्यूचर में पैसा आने के बाद वो पार्ट टेक केयर करेंगे, बट अभी नहीं करेंगे क्योंकि वो हाई हाई कैपिटल उसमें इन्वॉल्व होता है। तो इस वजह से जो आपका क्वेश्चन था क्या करते हैं, तो हम जो पार्ट कलेक्ट तो वो रिसाइकलर्स को देते हैं। दूसरा है रिफर्बिशर। कुछ पार्ट कुछ इलेक्ट्रॉनिक आते हैं कि थोड़े सही हो सकते हैं, तो हम रिफर्बिशर को देते हैं। तीसरा होता है कि इसको सेपरेट करके सेपरेट सेपरेट जो रिसाइकलर्स है, जैसे प्लास्टिक के रिसाइकलर को प्लास्टिक का प्रोडक्ट चला जाता है, आयरन वाले को आयरन। तो ये वाला पार्ट करते हैं हम, क्योंकि अभी ऑथराइज नहीं है सेंट्रल पॉल्यूशन कंट्रोल से। और हमारा जो बिजनेस मॉडल है, हम कलेक्शन पार्ट सॉल्व कर रहे हैं, हम रिसाइकलिंग का नहीं कर रहे। क्योंकि रिसाइकलिंग में ऑलरेडी प्लेयर है कई सारे जो रिसाइकलिंग, उनकी प्रॉब्लम है कलेक्शन। तो हमारा जो मेजर है कलेक्शन सॉल्व करना है, रिसाइकलिंग का अभी नहीं है। फ्यूचर में होएगा, बिजनेस हम कर करेंगे, बट वो इस पे डिपेंड करता है। आई होप कि मैंने आंसर सही दिया हूँ।
Thank you, Viraj. There are a couple of questions. Okay, the chat is really bursting now, but I'm going to. Well, I think there are some open questions. One is, yeah, okay, Chatsy's already sent something which is really nice in the chat. The question is on, are there some resources that you've come across in terms of theory for setting systems? Could you share tips for self-discipline? So if there's anything that you have, if you want to share in the chat or if you want to talk about it right now, that's also helpful. But Chatsy's just shared a couple of links. Um, there's a question from Samapika. Samapika, I'll let you come in because if you want to ask your questions directly.
All right, everyone. Hello, panel. So as Chatsi said while she was speaking about ESG, um, I have been learning about this accountability mechanism from corporate social responsibility to ESG. We've come a long way till now. But then again, even in ESG, when we study that, understanding the three grounds of it, the environment factor, the social and governance factor. So, for any company, if we come down to this triple bottom line, so of course it considers many um, overlapping factor, which also accounts for many of the sustainable development goals, of course. But then again, as all of you, the panel, are involved in this eco-entrepreneurship space, you must come across the experiences with ESG and uh, accountability mechanism. How do you think about should we change the landscape of ESG accounting because there are evident evidences of ESG evading or when companies try to green label their product or their practices. How do you feel about that?
There are frameworks in place. I think the challenge with anything not being successfully executed is that uh, there are many gaps in maybe able to how to measure. So again, ESG, all of those three words are very vague. Everybody interprets them differently. So, which is why I talked about the tolerance level, right? Every company, every organization that talks about ESG or being responsible has a different definition. Even when you look at their CSR or impact reports, they will define it in a very different way. Everybody does that differently. And so, first, as a consumer or as a reader or as somebody who is evaluating these businesses, it is first important to understand what is your source of truth. So uh, the frameworks that are used, there is circular design, there is life cycle assessment, there is carbon measurement, there is cradle to cradle process. There are so many frameworks. Um, so one is to define what is uh, what is the right accountability mechanism for you or for the business you are evaluating. Second is today, forget ESG, even financial diligence is a big question mark. There's tax evasion. There's lack of transparency across the board. So to be able to integrate deeper questions about whether you are responsible, whether you are paying fair wages, whether you are actually doing something for your team or for the environment, uh, is a is like a wishful thinking of sorts. Um, ESG accounting also today is extremely expensive to do. Getting access to a certification is extremely expensive to do. But what we are trying to do at Brown Living is we're trying to create a framework which is an extension of our Brown Lens, which will be called the Impact Meter. And we are trying to work with policymakers to ensure that that gets implemented. So today, even for packaged products, there is a regulation called the legal metrology, which makes sure that you have to be transparent about who's the manufacturer, who's the marketer, what is the ingredient list. And even in that, there are a lot of um, lies that you will see through. And especially in the green space, there's lots of greenwashing. Um, so we are trying to create a system that validates a lot of this through lab reports, through sample tests, through third-party verification, and quantifying all of this into one score, which is the ESG score typically. ESG as a framework has been implemented globally. In India, it is implemented only for large corporates that have, I think, beyond a certain amount of turnover and are, let's say, public listed companies. But for private limited, for MSMEs, and 80% of India, by the way, is unorganized. And by unorganized, I would mean they are entrepreneurs, they are small and medium businesses, they are micro entrepreneurs, they are artisans, they are farmers. These are people who don't have a registered business license. Unlike globally, everything that you trade in, even if you're making cupcakes at home, you need to have a business license. But India is growing and all of this is getting built as we grow. So, building some of these frameworks across the board and not just for the big guys would be something that would really help make this shift. uh, but at the end of the day, people who want to con will con you wherever they're sitting on the, uh, in the value spectrum. But honesty is something that comes very hard, comes very with a lot of difficulty. So setting transparency as a requirement must be implemented in this framework, and that's what we're trying to do. Um, and so I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I think what you said about um, how do we make it relatable to businesses that are emerging in India, that are small in scale, that will definitely take shape and scale in the future. This is exactly, I think, what I and Jenna were also discussing in the chat section itself, in the DMs,
Hmm.
that yes, what you said about that, yes, profitability must be placed ahead of people and planet, of course, because to get the people working, first of all, and because if that is not initiated from the very initial process of this transition, this just transition, then it's never going to be a norm. Sustainable business, the eco-entrepreneurship is never going to be a norm, and hence we won't see giants coming out of this space eventually. So yeah, I think then accountability measures also plays an important role, and uh, very valuable points coming from you, Chetsi. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Samapika. I think one final question I have to Arundhati, and then we'll do a closing round for the panel, and then we can end. Arundhati, we haven't touched upon this so far, but you went through a series of decision making when you decided that you wanted to shut down Beach and move ahead and do something else. And I think as an entrepreneur, that can be a very, very challenging and a very hard decision to come or to, face a certain reality and say, okay, this is the next most sensible course of action for me. So if you don't mind touching upon what were the challenges or sort of what made you make this decision? How did you make this decision? And then, of course, what's next for you and what does that look like?
Oh, okay. I've forgotten. It's been 6, 7 months since I made the decision. But I think a couple of things were happening, right? One is that the business was scaling, but the business was not scaling at the rate at which I would have liked it to scale. And that's got to do with the fact that this space in India is very new and nascent. And not just in India, I think globally, brands in the space of plant-based leathers are opening, closing. It has systemic issues with the fact that you know plant-based leather alternatives are significantly more expensive than other vegan plastic-based leather alternatives, or even leather for that matter, right? We have still not reached economies of scale as far as materials are concerned, as far as suppliers are concerned, just making this product a very uh, niche kind of a product. So there were those challenges in scale, but what I was also struggling with was something very internal, because here I am. I mean, when I am not running Beach, I used to do a lot of work in um, advocacy, in sustainability, talking about a lot of things in the climate space, which and in the conscious consumption space, which had very little to do with the products we made. And I kept asking myself that here I am telling people buy less, buy more responsibly. If at all, don't buy. That's the best option. And on the other side, my business always needs me to tell people to buy. That you have to come buy this bag, you have to come buy, there is this sale, there is this, and that dissonance was really bothering me at some level. Uh, I had my own worldview of the space had also expanded significantly. I knew a lot more and I understood the space, and not necessarily the sustainable fashion space, but I just feel like the climate sustainability space, I started understanding it so much better. I kept asking myself that if I really want to do impact, what am I doing? So I think there were these two large problems that I was kind of dealing with parallelly. And eventually I kind of said that no, uh, you have to learn to kind of move. And there is this term called the sunk cost fallacy. The sunk cost fallacy essentially means that when we have given an X amount of time to an idea or a business or a person or a relationship, we find it hard to back off because we feel, ki, oh my God, I've given it so much time and effort. The tipping point is around the corner. So should we give it some more? Should we give it some more? And I think that's a question every founder kind of grapples with. The good founders would also learn to know when it is time to kind of move on. Uh, Also, I mean, if some of you go on to become founders, you'll realize that businesses become very personal. They become a part of your identity. They become a part of who you are. I struggled with this question for the longest time, saying, if I'm not doing Beat and someone asks me, what am I doing? What am I going to say? A lot of those questions are very big in our head. We make them into real issues and we stress about them. But anyways, finally I decided, no, I'm going to move on and I'm going to take everything I've learned from the business, the connections, the learnings, the experiences, and go on and build in a higher impact space. So it's never an easy decision. It's please, if ever you find yourself in that space, please brace yourself for a lot of crying, a lot of stress, a lot of chats with a lot of friends, well wishers. But let me tell you, it's all right. 6 months later, I'm good. I'm happy. I'm doing what I want to do, and it's all good. Um, I am building something. I'm building two things now, Hita. One is I've started my own advisory in the climate and sustainability space. I work with a lot of businesses on climate storytelling. So how do you build those narratives into your comms for your stakeholders, customers, et cetera, et cetera. I work with some large organizations in the CSR space. I also work with founders who are setting up businesses in this space on how do they go about it. That's one. And I am building a business in the sustainable event space, a full stack business that's still under wraps, but I think should be out sometime next month. So the idea is that how do you come in from a design stage and a thought stage perspective and help large scale events, corporate events, all of that, uh, using the design principles we built for sustainability. So we don't say that at the end of the event you come and offset it or you come and recycle it, but how do you design them in ways that there is minimal, as little waste as is possible, and then consider things like offsetting. So yeah, working on these two big ideas now.
Lovely. Yeah, I think it's also, I mean, the reason I also asked this was a lot of our cohort, but also everybody else. I mean, when you look at entrepreneurship, you only sometimes want to focus on the positive side of things. And while that is a key factor in helping us keep going, I think it's also important to realize that sometimes we do need to take certain decisions, which might not be the most, what do you say, might not be the most rosiest decisions. But that does not necessarily mean that just because you've decided to close something down doesn't make you a failure. There's always learnings that you get from there, things that I mean, I'm sure you are who you are because of everything that you've built at Beat today. So all of that is going to build into everything else that you continue doing going on from there as well.
And it totally depends on how you code it. Do you code it as a failure? Do you code it as a pivot? Do you code it as a learning? Do you code it as, I gave this 5 years and gave me a lot in return, and now I'm going to go on to build something else. So, and that coding no one can do for you. No friend, family, outsider. That coding you have to do for yourself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Okay. So I think one final question, which is actually from Ishan, and I'm going to use that as our closing question because I don't think it's the easiest question to have. Can you give an elevator pitch for somebody who doesn't understand anything on climate change? What would you tell them in 30 seconds if you want to talk about sustainability or climate?
Question for me.
Yeah, and it's for all the panels. So Vijay ji, agar aapko start karna, you could also go from there.
Elevate the pitch in the sense of my business or any common.
अगर आपको किसी को if you want to explain on climate or sustainability, जो कोई किसी को कुछ पता नहीं है, उनको समझ में नहीं आ रहा क्या है, तो आप 30 सेकंड में उन्हें क्या बताएंगे ताकि उन्हें थोड़ा सा समझ में आ जाए?
एक्चुअली मैं इकोप्रेन्योर का छोटा सा मैं एग्जांपल 30 सेकंड का है, तो मैं इस वही देना चाहूंगा अपने बिजनेस को रिलेट करते हुए। तो मेरा जैसा रहता है, मेरे को भी 3 मिनट का पिच का टाइम मिलता है कई बार, तो वो एक्सपीरियंस के बिहाफ पे मैं रहता हूँ। तो सस्टेनेबिलिटी के अंदर क्या है कि जो इकोप्रेन्योर है, वो जो बिजनेस मॉडल उसका बनता है, वो एक इम्पैक्ट लाता है सस्टेनेबिलिटी एनवायरनमेंट के अंदर, उससे बेस पे वो बिजनेस बनाता है। तो हमारा क्या है, हम जो बिल्कुल शॉर्ट में पिच देते हैं, तो हम एक ब्रांड आइडेंटिटी बना रहे हैं स्क्रैप मार्केट को ऑर्गेनाइज करने के लिए। कस्टमर को एक रिकॉल वैल्यू है कि इफ यू वांट टू स्क्रैप एनी आर्टिकल, यू कैन कम विद द कबाड़ हटाओ प्राइवेट कबाड़ हटाओ ब्रांड। सो द बेसिक आइडेंटिटी इज द हुंडा मतलब कोका कोला, तो कबाड़ मतलब कबाड़ हटाओ होना चाहिए। ये हम टैगलाइन यूज करते कई बार लेमन लैंग्वेज में, शॉर्ट में अंडरस्टैंड करने के लिए कि ठीक है, अगर आपको कोई भी प्रोडक्ट खरीदना है तो माइंड में आ रहा है, बट स्क्रैप करने के लिए कोई ब्रांड नहीं आ रहा, तो वी आर क्रिएटिंग ब्रांड इन दिस सेगमेंट, so customer can easily sell their product, scrap their product on the Vibarata. So this is the 30 or 10 second my tagline, according to me.
Thank you. Thank you
I'll
so
go next. I would say that the climate crisis is not just about polar bears and distant glaciers. It's about our everyday lives. I think increasingly every day we are seeing climate disasters happening closer and closer to us, as much as I can see. our homes flooding every year, prices of food skyrocketing because crops are, not able to give you the harvest that we expected. It's the reality that we're facing, that if we don't act now, we may not survive this epidemic. Climate change means that our planet is heating up because of how we've built our lives, burning fossil fuels, creating waste, over consuming resources. This heat disrupts weather patterns, dries up rivers, and makes the air harder to breathe. But it's not like climate crisis has cannot be fixed. There is hope. There are lots of solutions available today. You'll hear about solar panels, you'll hear about EVs, but you can also make mindful choices on a daily basis. You can support sustainable businesses and innovations. You can reduce your plastic consumption. You can live more consciously. This is possibly a way to slow down damage and protect the planet for the future. And it's not just about saving nature, it's actually about saving ourselves.
Awesome.
Once we choose a lifestyle that is kinder to the earth, it ensures a better tomorrow for all of us. That's my 30 seconds.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That
Okay.
looked very well rehearsed, as if you said this like 400 times already.
Too many elevator pitches happen.
Thank you.
So, yeah, firstly, I'll tell Ishan that Ishan, you need to come up with your own elevator pitch. And the best 30-second elevator pitch takes hours and hours of writing, rewriting, and practice. But I'd say this, if I had to give someone a pitch and I only had 30 seconds, firstly, I would not quote any numbers, any statistics, nothing. Because I think if numbers and statistics were helpful and if they did the job, we would have figured this out long time back. Because the climate crisis is not a problem we're talking about today. We started talking about it 100 years ago. We've been speaking about it extremely actively for the last 30 years. Lots of numbers, lots of data, lots of charts, and it hasn't helped. I think the only way we can get more people into this conversation is if we make this conversation personal for people. We have to help people understand what does it mean in my context. So what does climate crisis mean for me as an urban person who lives in a high rise in Mumbai? I have a car, I have an AC, I have a lifestyle, etc., etc. Vis-a-vis, what does it mean for a farmer somewhere in Maharashtra who is facing drought? His crops are not growing, are very different. So there is no one way to explain the climate crisis to people. I feel it is very contextual to our lives. It is very contextual to how the footprints we live on this planet. How do we go about our daily thing? So if I was to have the most impactful conversation, I would try and understand what is that person's context. And then how do I contextualize it for that person? Because at the end of the day, stories that matter to me, stories that affect me, my life, my children, my families, etc., are the ones that I'm most likely to listen to and do something about. So my own 2 bits, but you should make your own pitch.
Thank you. Thank you so much to our most wonderful panelists. I think you've shared such wonderful insights, stories, personal learnings with everyone and with the audience. And also thank you to the audience for the brilliant questions that you've brought forward. It has really helped build and sort of engage the discussion and sort of bring it a lot more insights as well. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This recording will be uploaded on YouTube. So if someone hasn't been able to watch the whole thing, or if you want to share it with friends and family, you can also do that once it's up on YouTube, and we'll send you the link. And with that, have a lovely weekend. Thank you for your time, and thank you for being here with all of us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you.
So much. Thank you.